It started with soup. Not betrayal, not screaming matches or cheating scandals. Just a bowl of clam chowder and a scratched-up stool tucked under the kitchen island. I remember the way my spoon clinked against the ceramic. I remember the awkward quiet that filled the space between each slurp. And I remember my wife, Madison, leaning into the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, smiling too wide. "They're just old-fashioned," she said, her voice breezy but tight. Her parents, Marlene and Robert, sat in the dining room. Fine china, crystal glasses, linen napkins folded like swans. I'd spent the whole morning setting the table myself. I thought it was for all of us. Turns out, it was just for them. "We usually keep family dinners traditional," Marlene had said earlier that evening, standing in the foyer with that pinched smile of hers. "I hope you don't mind grabbing your plate and joining us after dessert. It's just how we do things." Just how we do things. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I picked up my bowl and quietly walked into the kitchen. Madison didn't follow me. She hovered in that middle space, between the life we had and the one her parents had always expected her to return to. I'm not dramatic by nature, not the revenge type, but something cracked inside me that night. Not out of pride, but out of something quieter, something sadder. A growing realization that no matter how many bills I paid or how many rooms I renovated, I'd always be the outsider in their eyes. Just the guy who married their daughter. I met Madison 5 years ago at a library of all places. She was holding a copy of East of Eden, flipping through it like she already knew the ending but wanted to feel it again. We clicked over Steinbeck and shared a coffee that turned into dinner, then another, then a whole life. When we bought the house, I thought it symbolized our future. It was a 2-story colonial on a quiet street, a little worn but full of potential. We split the down payment, mostly from my savings, but we didn't keep score. At least, I thought we didn't. Madison wanted to keep the paperwork simple. "We're married. Everything's ours," she'd said. But I was the one who handled the bank meetings, the closing signatures, the deed. I was the one who insisted on putting the house in my name, just in case. "Not because I don't trust you," I told her, "but because it's my investment too." She agreed. She forgot. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. The real shift came slowly after that dinner. More visits from her parents. More subtle exclusions. They brought their own wine, rearranged my furniture, criticized the landscaping I'd spent weekends sweating over. And Madison, she stopped defending me, stopped noticing. Until one weekend in early spring. They were staying over again. 3rd visit in 6 weeks. I came home late from work and found Robert reclined in my chair, shoes off, flipping through channels like he paid the cable bill. Marlene was in the dining room arranging flowers. Mine, bought with my card. Madison was in the kitchen making them tea. No one noticed me. No one said, "Welcome home." Dinner was awkward. The tension buzzed under the polite conversation like a misaligned radio frequency. Halfway through the roast, Marlene turned to Madison and said, "You've done such a lovely job maintaining the place. It really feels like your mother's home now." "Thank you," Madison beamed. And then she added, almost flippantly, "It's the least we could do, staying here rent-free." That's when I felt it. The line, drawn not with hostility, but indifference. The worst kind. The kind that tells you you're irrelevant. A background character in your own house. That night, I stood in the empty garage, where their suitcases were stacked neatly in a corner, and just stared. It was dusty, cold, but it was still a room, a space, a roof. And that's when the idea came. Not revenge, just clarity. If they didn't want me at their table, maybe they didn't deserve the house I sat in silence to build. They say real power is quiet. I used to think that was just a line. But standing in my own garage with oil stains on the floor and the hum of silence in my ears, I started to understand it. The next morning, I called my attorney. "Just need to confirm everything's still in my name," I said, leaning against the hood of my car while Marlene reheated coffee in the kitchen behind me. "The house, the title, the deed. All yours," she replied. "Hasn't changed since closing." That was all I needed to hear. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. I smiled more than usual. I laughed at Robert's jokes. I let Marlene comment on the curtains without a word. I let them believe they'd won some kind of war. That I was tamed. Dismissed. Background. Meanwhile, I was drafting a message to a local real estate firm. Not to sell, but to rent. See, what they didn't know was I'd already purchased a small loft downtown a few months earlier. A quiet little place I used as an office. technically under a shell company I'd built years ago during some freelance consulting. Madison never asked. I never offered. It had a view of the river and a sense of peace I'd started craving more and more. So I had the firm list our home, my home, as a furnished short-term rental, effective in 60 days. I planned it meticulously. Every clause, every loophole. I made sure it could be used as both a residence and a private event space. I even scheduled some minor renovations that would require vacating the premises temporarily for safety. Then I printed the updated deed, folded it neatly, and slid it into an envelope. Dinner came on a Sunday. Robert's roast, Marlene's favorite Riesling. Madison set the table for 4. For once, I joined them. Dining room, full place setting. I sat at the head of the table. Marlene raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she said, blinking. "Are you joining us tonight?" I smiled. Thought I'd try the family table for once. Madison gave me a look. Confused. A little suspicious. I just poured the wine. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. Chewing, sipping, the usual surface pleasantries. Then I set my fork down. "There's something I wanted to share," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. Robert groaned quietly. "Not during dinner, I hope." No, this won't take long." I placed the envelope on the table, right in front of Marlene. "Go ahead. Open it." She gave me a sharp look, then slowly unfolded the papers. Her eyes skimmed, paused, skimmed again, then froze. "Is this the deed?" I said, voice calm. "To this house." She blinked. "But why are you showing me this?" Madison leaned forward. "What's going on?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "Because starting next month, this house will be a short-term rental property. I'll be moving into the loft downtown." The room fell silent. Robert set his fork down with a clink. "You're what?" "I'm moving out," I said. "The house is mine legally. I've decided to rent it. Fully furnished, utilities included. The market's too good to pass up. I'm sure you understand." Marlene looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "But where will we go?" Madison asked, voice tight. "There's a temporary structure in the garage," I said smoothly. "It's dry, has electricity, space heaters, even a half bath. You could sleep there, at least while you figure things out." Marlene gasped. "You're joking," Robert growled. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," I said. "You told me the dining room was for family, so I figured it's time I stopped pretending we're one." Madison's eyes welled. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "You asked me to shrink myself for your parents. To stay quiet. To sit in the kitchen and be grateful. I've been a guest in my own life, Madison. And that ends now." She started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not trying to punish you," I said, my voice softer now. "But I need space. Real space. To think. To breathe. To remember who I am. And if that means stepping away from this house and letting you all experience life without my constant quiet presence, then so be it." Marlene stood up. "This is outrageous." Robert slammed his napkin down. "Ungrateful punk." I stood too. Calm. Still. "I bought this house with my money. I made every payment. Fixed every leak. Painted every wall. And I sat in that kitchen and ate my dinner alone because I loved your daughter enough to swallow my pride. But pride isn't infinite. And love doesn't survive in silence." Madison stared at her plate. "You should have told me you were this unhappy." I nodded. "I should have. I own that. But you should have seen it without me having to say a word." They didn't leave right away. For all their bluster, Marlene and Robert stayed in that garage for nearly a week after I made my announcement. They patted the concrete with yoga mats, hung up a few curtains, tried to act like it was temporary, like they were being gracious. Madison didn't come with me to the loft. She stayed behind, said she needed time to think. I understood. Time was the one thing I had in abundance now. The first few nights alone in the loft were strange, too quiet, too clean. I'd built a life around compromise, around showing up to things I wasn't invited to and smiling like I belonged. Now there was nothing to show up for. Just my own thoughts, my own company, my own keys in my own pocket. I started cooking for myself again, playing records, leaving books on the couch without anyone moving them. Small things, but they felt like small freedoms. A week later, I got a text from Madison. "Can we talk?" We met at a cafe halfway between the house and the loft. She wore a coat I'd bought her last Christmas and didn't look me in the eye until the coffee arrived. "I was blindsided," she said. "It felt like a stunt." I nodded. "I know. I just wish you'd told me how bad it was." I did, just not with words. She looked down. I didn't realize how much of you I'd stopped seeing. I wanted to be angry, but I wasn't. I was tired, grieving something that hadn't died all at once, but in slow, quiet pieces. I don't hate you, I said. I don't even hate them, but I can't be invisible anymore. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I don't want you to be. We sat there for a long time. No promises, no dramatic gestures, just two people realizing they might have loved each other into roles that no longer fit. After that, things moved fast. Her parents left the garage the next day, checked into a hotel near the airport. Madison followed a few days later. She packed a bag, left a note. Not angry, not cold, just honest. I need to find out who I am without them. Without us. She thanked me for everything. For trying. For not screaming. For choosing dignity over spectacle. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and tucked it away in a drawer I almost never open. The house went on the market a month later. It sold in 3 days. I didn't keep the proceeds to myself. I gave Madison her fair share. Not out of obligation, but because despite everything, I'd meant my vows. Even the silent parts. I still walk past that house sometimes. Different curtains now. New family inside. Kids' bikes on the porch. It doesn't sting, not the way I thought it would. It's just a house. A place I outgrew. But I'll never forget the way that chair felt under me that night. In the kitchen, with the soup. I'll never forget how small I felt, eating in the margins of my own life. And I'll never let myself be seated there again.